Hey guys, it's MJ, the Student's Actuary, and we're going to be talking about CT1. I'm going to look at what's going to be in the exam and just going to do a quick review of the subject. You can see I've just made a little Excel thing here on all the various years and the different questions that they ask and how many marks they're for. And it takes, these exams seem to follow the same pattern, and yeah, it's kind of, this is what's going to be in the exam, these chapters, this content, and this is the marks that I expect it to be. The exam for me is in 2 days time, so we'll know in 2 days time if my little predictions are correct. You can see some of the big chapters like project appraisal, immunization, and force of interest. But yeah, so that's going to be the exam. Let's have a quick review of the material. So just going to go through the 47 little notes quickly. Chapter 1, it's essentially background knowledge. You just have to learn these little patterns, and you get introduced to the whole concept of a timeline and different payments and all that. It's not too difficult. Chapter 2 is also another foundation chapter known as the time value of money. Money in the future is worth less than money in the present if you have a positive interest rate. Then it also introduces this thing known as the discount and the discount factor. Takes a little bit of time to get your head around that, but you see it's actually not too bad. Just a little example there. Then chapter 3 was also foundational. Here we learn about the different types of interest rates. What happens if we have an effective rate, a monthly effective rate. How do we convert between the two? So it's essential that you learn these formulas off by heart. But if you do enough examples, you kind of learn them along the way. Then we have the force of interest. It can be a little bit difficult and intimidating at first. You've got exponentials and integrals and all that, but again, it's not very difficult. Chapter 4 was, you can see, a very short chapter just on talking about inflation and real and money rates. Chapter 5 is when the fun starts, because this is going to be our first exam question, and it can be for up to 12 marks. Well, that's what the average has been over the past 7 papers. It is quite difficult, the first few, but once you get your hang of it, it's kind of they ask the same questions again and again. Just be very careful about your little times, and yeah, just quite a bit of practice. They also give you quite another tricky part, and this is the present value and accumulated value of a payment stream. So yeah, brush up on your integration skills. Chapter 6 is very much, again, back to foundational chapter. It introduces the concept of the annuity, the present value of the annuity and the future value of the annuity. It also introduces annuities in advance and perpetuities, which is this little guy here, and also annuities that are made not yearly but on a peathly basis, say monthly and stuff like that. So again, learn your conversion formulas. Yeah, that was me just spending some more time on the peathly thing. Chapter 7, this is when your annuities can increase. They can either increase discretely or continuously. We also learn about deferred annuities. And yeah, the big trick with the increasing annuity, if you're starting at 50, then you're going to 60, then 70, 80, 90, 100, your annuities are increasing by 10. And the big trick is to subtract 10 from your first amount. So remember, we started with 50, 60, 70. What you want to have is start at 40 and then go 50, 60, like that. So you start off with 40 as your base annuity, and then 10 is your increasing one. And the reason you do that is that the 10 adds to the 40 and makes it 50. And then you just have the same time period, and it just makes your work a little bit neater. You can also do a compound increasing annuity. You simply just change the interest rate by using that formula with the growth. It's not that difficult. Chapter 8 was equations of value, just another foundation chapter. I remember when I was at varsity, you used to get a mark just for saying that line. The present value of income is equal to the present value of the outgo. It also introduces this thing known as interpolation, which comes in handy later on in the course. So again, it's another formula to learn. Chapter 9 is our next exam question. It can be up for, it's around 10 marks. One paper didn't have a question on it, so that's why the average marks is lower than 10. Essentially, there's two ways of finding out your loan capital. That is prospectively, the present value of your future payments, and retrospectively, where you accumulate the value of the loan and you accumulate the value of the payments made to date. Then we have this whole thing of every payment that we make, it has two types of elements. It's got the interest element and the capital element. Learn the techniques on how to isolate them. It isn't that difficult, but what you sometimes have to do in order to get to find one thing, you have to find something before it, and that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So know your theory, know the method, and the maths of this question is actually quite easy. Sometimes they can be quite creative in their questions, to calculate the capital and the sixth payment, and they only give you certain values. So it's good to know the subject quite well, know all the types of formulas, because you might need to use 2 or more to find your answer. Then what they sometimes do is they give you a loan schedule that you have to fill out, but that is quite easy to do. Then there's this flat rate of interest and annual percentage rate. I have not seen that in any of the past papers. I'm not going to talk too much time about it, but yeah, you can read up on it just in case it is in the test. Okay, chapter 10. This is 2 exam questions come out of this chapter, and yeah, it can total up to 20% of the paper. I've even seen some of the project appraisal questions being worth 18 and sometimes even 19 marks. Essentially, the theory of this is very easy. Net present value is present value of income minus present value of outgo. Internal rate of return is just the interest rate that makes the net present value equal to 0. Payback period and discount payback period are kind of self-explanatory, and accumulated profit is also quite simple. However, the questions they ask are long, are big, and can be very nasty. So what you want to do is almost save this question for the end of the paper, draw a nice timeline, and just show all your working out, go through it step by step. It's unlikely you're going to get 100% for this question, so make sure you can score as many marks as possible by showing the examiners what you are doing. Don't underestimate this question. That's just a little cheap example. In the test, they are much harder than that. The other part of the chapter 10 questions are this measuring the investment performance. You can either use the money weighted rate of return, where you just use the cash flow, so you would ignore the other fund values. There's the time weighted rate of return, where you then use the fund thingies. Just learn the formulas. They are a little bit strange when you learn them like that, but do an example and they are quite intuitive. And then just remember why time weighted return is better. It's better when comparing manager, since it's not dependent on cash flows. They love to give that, you do this thing for like 3 marks, and then to explain for 3 marks why it is like that, you have to say because it wasn't distorted by the cash flows. And sometimes the investor will perform really well and then really badly, and depending on where the cash flow is, it influences his overall result. Time weighted rate of return is not biased by that, and it's important to say that. So yeah, that's basically what we just talking about the pros and cons of each one. Some theory, it's worth learning, it is examined frequently. The linked internal rate of return, I have not come across a question with this. So I'm not going to go into too much time here, but you'll read up on it. You never know. It might just come up on the day that you write the test. Okay, chapter 11 is another exam question. It comes up with 4 marks, and they can ask you on any of these 16 investments. The most important thing is that in this exam is that you must explain the very basics. So say who issues, like let's say you're doing Eurobonds. Say who issues it, it's international corporations in different markets at whatever currency. Explain the cash flows, even if it's something as simple as a fixed interest government bond. Explain that you're going to get some coupons with a redemption payment at the end. And then afterwards, System T, which you'll come across in the exam CA1, it's meant to talk about the security, talk about the yield, talk about the spread, talk about tax, the expense, the marketability, and the term of these investments. But yeah, this is very much a theory question. I didn't spend too much time on it because it's only worth 4 marks, and I have done the later subjects, but it is a nice foundational material for your later exams. Chapter 12. This is the chapter that gives me the most heartache. It is, like, again, the theory is very simple, except for this capital gains test. Remember that thing, and yeah, just learn your little formula and you should be fine. But take your time on this question. They do make it tricky, they do make it long, they confuse you with the dates. So yeah, just be prepared. It is a difficult question. Show you're working out so that you can get some marks. They might show the worst case scenario. We have to choose between early or late, optional redemption dates. You might also have to find the value of a dividend or calculate, which is quite easy. Property is a little bit more difficult in the sense that they have strange rent reviews where it only increases every other year, and it's just it's quite awful. Like I said, just show you're working out, explain to the examiner what you're doing. Unlikely you're going to get 100% for this question, with time pressure and everything, but make sure you're scoring at least 50%, 60% so that you can lock in your pass. Running yield and inflation is quite chilled. Inflation index, at first it appears quite icky, but it is quite simple if they give you the QO and the QN. If you just get this value of index, then it should be fine and apply the theory. Okay, chapter 13. I really enjoyed chapter 13. I found it quite easy, and it's talking about arbitrage and forward contracts. You might get a question for 2 marks that just explain arbitrage, that it's immediate risk-free profit, or that there's 0 cost and a probability of a risk-free profit. They talk about assumptions, just say we assume that no arbitrage opportunities exist, and that there's the law of one price, which means if something's got the same cash flow, it must have the same price. Then there's these forward contracts. Basically, you apply the formula with the information that you're given, and it's just think about it. They might throw in a little curveball, a little trick, but it's quite easy to spot. And yeah, that formula is actually even given in the orange book that you get in the exam, so you don't even have to learn that. It's unfortunate that it's only worth 6 marks because it is quite a nice, easy chapter. The proof is a little bit more tricky, but I haven't seen it in the exams. It's nice to just go over just for your own understanding. And then this is a formula that you do want to learn. This is the value of the forward contract. The big thing here is that you're discounting, where for the other one you saw we were accumulating. So learn this value or this formula, and yeah, this is what makes the questions a little bit harder, because you just have to calculate the forward price twice and then subtract the 2. And just make sure that you're doing it for the long forward contract, because if it's for the short forward contract, it's the negative of that. But otherwise, it's not too bad. Chapter 14, it's another fun chapter for me. It's quite, I guess it's a little bit tricky the first time you do it, but you get used to it. Basically, you have spot rates and you have forward rates. A spot rate is the interest rate from time 0 to the future, or whatever future value you are, and the forward rate is the interest rate in only starts in time t until time n. So, I mean, yeah, you can see it here on the little graphs. Just understand how all these interest rates link up, how you can find the one by if you have the other two, and yeah, like I said, it's quite a nice chapter. This is the what's this stuff? This is the interest rate term structure theories. The inflation preference one is actually not in CT1. That's from CA1 that I've just included. But yeah, just learn the 4 things. I've spelt it in this way, so it gives you the acronym LIME so that you can remember them. Liquidity preference, people prefer short-term bonds. Inflation, the longer dated, the more exposed it is. Market segmentation, supply and demand determines the price because people have different liabilities. And expectation theory is, well, what is the expected movement in the short-term interest, because that gives a nice proxy for the long term. Then we have gross redemption yield, which is kind of just the effective interest rate that satisfies the value of a bond. You use your different spot rates, and then it's your one little thing. It's quite easy, but you have to use interpolation, which we spoke about earlier. Par yield, it's also quite straightforward. It's just it's the annual coupon rate so that the bond is redeemed at par. Pretty chilled. Then we get onto something known as immunization, which is another question all by itself, and this can be up to 12 marks. And at first it appears quite daunting, but it actually is quite easy. When you read the examiner's comments, this is normally the best answered question on the paper. Basically, you have discounted mean term, and the big trick is to just put the T there, and then that almost becomes an increasing annuity if you're working with annuities. Yeah, you can see there, made that into an increasing annuity. It's not that bad. Volatility, modified duration, again, isn't that bad. Convexity, sometimes you don't have to actually calculate this. You can just say if the assets times are first and last, the liabilities are between it, then you can say, well, there's convexity because of there's a greater spread. Then Reddington's conditions is the present values must equal, the volatilities must be equal, and the convexity of the assets must be greater than that of the liabilities. What makes this question a little bit tricky is that they'll say, how much should we invest in this asset, how much should we invest in that asset to have Reddington's conditions, and then you're just going to find 2 equations, and you're going to solve them simultaneously. These 5 reasons why Reddington's is a bad idea or not perfect, I have not seen it being asked, but yeah, it might be worth just learning for, just in case. Then I just do a little immunization example. And yeah, finally we on the last chapter, chapter 15. This is worth 10 marks. Sorry, my notes at this stage got very, very boring just with the theory. Do a few questions. It's not that difficult. Essentially, you've got 3 things. You've got the fixed interest rate model, where you roll the dice on the interest rate, but then it's fixed and it doesn't vary from year to year. Then you have the varying interest rate model, where every year you're going to roll the dice and you might get a different interest rate. And then finally, you have the log normal distribution of varying interest rates. And this might be worth just spending a little bit of time on. This chapter it's difficult if you haven't done statistics or CT3, the CT3 exam, but if you have, then this should be a walk in the park for you. And yeah, it's also the examiners say a very well answered question. So yeah, there we have it. Force of interest, you should be able to get, just brush upon your interpolation I'm sorry, your integration. Loan schedule, just learn and you should be fine. Measuring investment performance, again, learning and you're good. Project appraisal, remember to be wise with your time. You might not get this one, don't kick yourself if you don't. Investment theory, just learn, try get 3 out of those 4 marks, or at least 2. Interest problem, that can be quite difficult. These guys here, so just show you're working and try score at least some marks. Forward contracts, get 100% for because they're quite easy. Spot rates and yield, again, get 100% because they're quite easy. And then your immunization and varying interest models, you should be fine with. So yeah, that is the exam. Hopefully you guys are well prepared for the exam that's on Monday, the 22nd of September. Today it's the 20th. So yeah, I wonder if my predictions are correct. Anyway, happy studying, and yeah, thanks for watching.